Hey everybody, Brendan here. Welcome back to another tournament game video. I'm covering my second tournament, being back in tournament play after a very long hiatus. And I'm playing Noah again, who was my round one opponent of my first game back from my hiatus in my first tournament. So, something I mentioned about Noah last time was that they're like 2700 bullet on chess.com. Very strong opponent. They almost crushed me in my last game. I got lucky because they thought they had a tactic which actually just ended up working in my favor instead of theirs. But now I'm playing with white pieces instead of them, and I'm hoping to make something of it. Let's see what happens. I play e4, and then we see a Caro-Kann. So we go into my normal Caro-Kann prep with knight c3, takes, and then knight to f6 here. So after knight to f6, the first off, just one thing to mention is bishop f5 is also very, very common, probably more common than knight f6. But yeah, my opponent played knight to f6 here. So the best thing that we can do is to take on f6, and the argument here that black is trying to make is that although they have a slightly damaged pawn structure with the doubled pawns, they also get rapid development by being able to play e takes f6, and now both bishops can develop quite easily here. We see c3 from me, bishop to d6, bishop to d3, and then I played, or they played castles, and then I played queen to c2. So the idea of queen to c2 is just to attack h7 and ask how they want to defend it. Do they want to play h6, g6, or something different, which there is a different move here, which is what they played. So first off, they throw in rook e8 check. This is well known that this should be played because the knight doesn't really want to be on e2 as much as it wants to be on f3, but now we have to play knight to e2, which is unfortunate. So after knight e2, they played the move h5. So not h6, h5. Why would this be played? So the biggest idea is that white actually might want to castle long here. And that is, and I believe, one of the best plans for white to try to get an advantage, because they did play the move h5. But in doing so, they're trying to prevent us from creating a pawn break on that side of the board. So if I were to play a move like h3, now after knight d7 and g4, they can play h4 and try to close things down. And all of a sudden, it's maybe a little bit harder to create another pawn break here. So this is just one of the ideas behind this h5 move. But all right, h5, I played bishop to e3 instead. h3 is also, I believe, playable, but I just like playing bishop e3. Knight to d7, castles long. Knight to f8. Rook h to e1, which I don't think is necessarily the right plan. I think still going for some sort of h3 and a g4, some combination of going for a g4 break, just makes more sense here, because the rook is actually on a good file for the king. But this move ended up working out well for me. b5, and now I made a mistake with knight to f4. So here I have a pretty significant edge after the move d5, which is something I considered in the game. For example, if takes, then we can take on b5 here, and we're quite happy. They have to play the move rook to e5, which is something that just feels very, very clumsy on the square. And I think a line that the computer gives here is bishop c6, bishop to f5 attacking the queen, queen to a4, and then bishop back to d7, which is kind of funny, preventing bishop takes a8. As if the rook were to move, then the pawn would hang. So the computer line continues with knight d4 here. And if obviously takes, we should mention that knight takes c6 is obviously very good for us. But in general, we're quite happy in this position just because they have an isolated d-pawn, and our king is actually quite safe. So yeah, nothing to really worry about too much, because this pawn may fall, and also this h5 push doesn't really make too much sense in a position like this. But all right, after b5, knight to f4, my opponent kind of made a mistake back with a5, not taking the knight on f4 or anything, which is good. But there's actually a funny move here, which is bishop g4. And this forces knight e2. Why? Okay, let's find out. First off, if rook d2, bishop takes f4. I think that's pretty clear. The rook on e1's undefended. But the more important move that we should look at is f3. And now there's rook takes e3, which is very annoying because after takes, they can play bishop takes, and if takes, then takes on e3 here, and blacks up a piece. So that would be very, very bad to run into. If you have to play knight e2, something went wrong here. Now they can consider moving back or playing something else. But okay, knight f4, a5, and I took the pawn, which was very lucky for me. b4, and I played c4 here, which is a mistake because of something we'll see later in the game, but I don't want to spoil it yet. a4, I played queen d2, and then they played a3, which I think is a mistake. That's the reason why I did play queen d2 as well. There's two reasons behind it. You'll see the one big reason in the game. But I played queen d2 as well to avoid b3, where after takes, even if I get a pawn here, they do open up the a file, and they can argue that my king is weaker than theirs, which I don't even think is a crazy argument at all. So queen d2 avoids b3. If b3, then I can play a3. But yeah, they played a3, and then I played b3, and everything is closed on this side of the board. And now they make their final mistake with the move c5. And what I was mentioning before, the move that I had also works here. It's actually better here, which is nice. And it's white to move and win. So I'll give you a few seconds to try to figure out what the move may be. So a lot of people, when I showed them this position, guessed that it would be knight takes g7, but I don't think it's actually that clear in this position, because it's hard for us to get pieces over to like the g3 or the g7 square in order to checkmate. Instead, just switching the move orders wins you the game. Bishop h6. This pawn cannot be defended, and more importantly, it cannot move. And let's see why. So before we do, actually, maybe we should look at some variations. Rook takes e1, rook takes e1. And for example, if knight e6, bishop takes g7 is a move that works perfectly fine here. Where after knight takes g7, we can just play queen h6. And if they were to take, then queen h7, queen h8 will checkmate them. And if they do anything else, really, there's either checkmate on g7 or some sort of knight f6. So their only move here is like bishop f4, followed by f5. And of course, they just give back a piece. They're down 2 pawns here. And, well, this is completely losing as long as we don't make some really, really stupid move here. As long as we try to focus on good development, good development, we will be fine and we will be winning. Because the attack continues up 2 pawns, as mentioned before. So instead, my opponent here, after taking, played g6, because they didn't, I think they missed the move here, but this is why I played bishop h6. I saw this g6 and my next move. So white to move and win. So the move here is rook e8. And funnily enough, it's just a geometry issue. They cannot defend f6. I'm threatening knight takes f6 right now. Because obviously when you see this position with g6, you want to take on f6 really bad, but you can't because queen takes. So remove the queen. If they take on e8, knight takes f6 just wins the queen here and the game. And if they move away, which they did, then we take on f6. So queen c7 was played. I took on f6, king h8. And after bishop takes on f8 here, my opponent ended up resigning because it's just mate, I believe, next move by force. So if they do something like bishop f4, we can just go bishop h6 with checkmate. And if they go bishop takes, yes, it is still mate in 1. Queen h6 is checkmate here because the bishop is pinned to the king. So yeah, that's how the game ended. After takes, and bishop takes f8, it was a one of the prouder games I've played. It was a quick finish, and it was a crazy one. But there was some interesting moments in it, especially with this like bishop g4 earlier on, rook h1 here, and knight f4. There's this bishop g4 move. So this is something that I kept in my memory for later, because I got a similar game in the future as compared to this one. But yeah, that's game number 1 from this event. Started off with a great one. My opponent was really nice about it after the game, said that I played a good game, which felt really nice. Maybe that's just an ego trip mentioning that in the first place, but they're so super strong, and I got lucky to even beat them in the first place, and to have a game with things like bishop h6 and rook e8 is just super lucky to have, because you don't really see those types of themes too often. But that's it, and I will see you in game number 2. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.